Hello there, good evening ladies and gentlemen, this is Al24 News streaming live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our news program. World leaders are applying diplomatic pressure on Russia ahead of a series of meetings over the Ukraine crisis, including a United Nations Security Council session this Monday. After Pyongyang sent a suspected intermediate-range ballistic missile into space on Sunday, the US issued a straightforward call to North Korea to join the direct negotiations regarding the nuclear and the missile programs with no preconditions. The United Arab Emirates intercepted a ballistic missile fired by Yemen Houthis rebel early Monday as Zionist President Isaac Herzog was visiting the country. Also coming up next, Mali has given the French ambassador 72 hours to leave the country after hostile, outrageous comments by former colonial power France about its transitional government. During the past 4 days, China has detected some 119 cases of COVID-19 among athletes and personnel linked to the Beijing Winter Olympics, with authorities imposing a closed-loop bubble to keep participants, staff and media separated from the public. Hello again and welcome to Al24 World Latest. First, the United Arab Emirates UAE claims to have intercepted and destroyed a ballistic missile fired from Yemen as the Gulf state to receive Zionist president on the maiden visit to the country. Sofian Kanchouri on what follow.
The missile's debris fell in an occupied region, according to the UAE's defense ministry. It was unclear whether the rocket was aimed for Abu Dhabi, the UAE capital, or Dubai. According to the state news agency, the country's civil aviation authority said air traffic was proceeding as usual and all flight operations were functioning properly despite the attack. In a broadcast presentation, Yahya Saria, a military spokesman for the Iran-aligned group in Yemen, claimed that the offices of international firms in the UAE will be target of strikes in the coming time, confirming earlier warnings.
We reiterate that the enemy state, the United Arab Emirates, will remain an unsafe country, so long as they continue the belligerence against our beloved Yemeni people.
In a tweet, the Emirati Ministry of Defense stated it had destroyed the launch point for one of the missiles that had fallen on the UAE. It did not provide any additional information on the site's actual location. Yemen's Houthi group announced within hours that it had fired a number of ballistic missiles at Abu Dhabi, as well as many drones at Dubai, the regional financial center.
Syrian air defense intercepted a Zionist missile barrage pointed at the capital Damascus. According to the state television, citing a military source, the interception resulted in some material damage. There was no more information immediately available, and Zionists made no statement on the strike, which took place shortly after 3 a.m. in Damascus. Sudanese security forces killed a protester as they cracked down on thousands marching for civilian rule. Medics said taking the number killed since last year's military coup to at least 79. Marwa Blayor, watch follow.
Sudanese security forces have killed a 27-year-old protester after they launched an attack during anti-coup demonstrations in the capital Khartoum, according to a group of medics. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Sudan's capital and other cities calling for a transition to civilian rule, to democracy, in the latest in a months-long string of demonstrations denouncing the October military coup, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, that plunged the country into chaos. The coup has overturned Sudan's transition to democratic rule after 3 decades of repression and international isolation under former President Omar Bashir. The African nation has been on a fragile path to democracy since a popular uprising forced the military to remove Bashir and the government in 2019.
We demand for a civilian government and the military council to be taken to court, and those who killed people to be handed justice, and those who are making our lives hard here also to be brought to justice.
The protesters marched toward the presidential palace, the area that has seen deadly clashes between protesters and security forces in previous rounds of demonstrations.
The Sudanese people have taken to the street to reject, denounce and fight with everything we have and with all the tears that we have the military coup of October 25th.
Protesters are called by the Sudanese Professionals Association and the resistance committees, which were the backbone of the uprising against Bashir and persistent anti-coup protests in the past 3 months.
Today, the French ambassador to Bamako was summoned and notified of a decision by Mali's government inviting him to leave the nation territory within 72 hours, following a hostile and outrageous commands by the French Foreign Affairs Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian, recently saying that Mali's ruling regime was out of control amid escalating tensions between the West African state and its European partners over military cooperation and elections, according to Mali's government statement. On Sunday, the White House released a statement demanding the Taliban to immediately release Mark Frerkes, a U.S. civil engineer who was abducted 2 years ago and is believed to be the last American hostage held by the Taliban. Zara Farjani.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Sunday called for the release of Mark Frerkes, a U.S. civil engineer and contractor from Lombard, Illinois, who was kidnapped in January 2020 in the Afghan capital. Frerkes worked in Afghanistan for a decade on development projects in Kabul. Biden's announcement came on the eve of the 2-year anniversary of the kidnapping.
The Taliban must immediately release Mark before it can expect any consideration of its aspirations for legitimacy. This is not negotiable. Threatening the safety of Americans or any innocent civilians is always unacceptable, and hostage-taking is an act of particular cruelty and cowardice.
Biden pulled U.S. troops out of Afghanistan in August, closing more than 2 decades of war that began with the U.S.-led invasion following the September 11, 2021 attacks and ended with the Taliban back in power. Frerkes' family has criticized the U.S. government for not pressing harder to secure his release. Last week, his sister Charlene Kakura made a personal plea to Biden in a Washington Post opinion piece titled, "President Biden, please bring home my brother, the last American held hostage in Afghanistan." According to reports, Taliban negotiators have previously suggested a prisoner exchange, swapping Frerkes for Bashir Norzai, an Afghan tribal warlord and alleged Taliban associate imprisoned for life in the United States for smuggling heroin into the country. However, the U.S. has expressed little interest in the deal.
The United States is concerned North Korea's escalating missile tests could be another step to resume tests of nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missile. The U.S. on Sunday made a direct appeal to North Korea to join direct talks with no preconditions about its nuclear and missile programs after Pyongyang sent a suspected intermediate-range ballistic missile into space. U.S. Senators Bob Menendez and James Reek, working on the bill concerning Russia's sanctions, said they are very close to reaching a deal on legislation to sanction Russia over its action on Ukraine. The chairman and the top Republican on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee said they were going to move forward on the bill this week. And to have a clear idea over this Russia-US escalation of tension, joining me live via phone call, Mr. Ihab Abbas Abdelhadi, who is a journalist and a political analyst within the American Matters and International Relations. Mr. Ihab, taking into consideration the mass landing of Russian troops over Ukraine borders and what Sergei Lavrov said, that our next steps is by the hand of our President Vladimir Putin. Does the U.S. really believe an invasion is imminent?
Yes, according to Biden's administration and the CIA reports coming from Russia and Ukraine, United States believes that the invasion is due to happen. We were expecting it to happen by the end of this month, January, or the beginning, at the most, to be by the end of February. So, yes, it's according to Biden's administration, it's imminent, yes.
Mr. Ihab, I'm sorry to cut your train of thoughts, but on the other side, within the Eastern Europe borders, Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine president, according to his local media reports, sees that U.S. is exaggerating the Russian threat for the political reasons. What would you say about that?
I think that Russia has its own political reasons and also concerns about its national security. As we see the implement of the Western powers that has all the military equipment almost across the Russian borders within the NATO countries and also the other countries that would like to join NATO. And this is why Russia thinks that it has to be, something has to be done with Ukraine and Ukraine policies. This is why Russia would like to see changes in the Ukraine leadership. And also from the other side, the United States, you know, this is like a political game between Biden and Putin. And both leaders would try to keep their national security away from any kind of threats that could be coming from NATO or coming from Russia. This is why the scene right now there it's not clearly that goes to any side of the two big sides right now. We don't know where is it going, what's going to happen in the next moves from both powers, but definitely there is something has been cooking right now in the political and military.
Mr. Ihab, as closure, do you think that this diplomacy will take the lead for a better solution, or the battlefield is the main goal, or at least from one side, the Russian maybe?
We'd like to see a solution, a political solution. No need to go to the battlefield. But according to what we see right now, like the American military equipment that has been moved from Latvia, Estonia, and the United Kingdom towards Ukraine, it seems that there is something military would be in the scene within the next weeks, according to the concerns that Biden administration have over the possibilities of invasion from Russia to Ukraine land. So it could be happen very soon, and it could be happen within the next month or two at the most. But if, on the other hand, the Western powers having a good response to Russian concerns over its security, national security, I think we could see political solution that would prevent any kind of military operations.
Mr. Abdelhadi, journalist and political analyst, joined me live from the United States. Thank you so much for this clarification. In the same line of... Thank you so much. In the same line of thought, the United States requested the United Nations Security Council to meet in public on Monday to discuss Russia troops buildup on the border with Ukraine as international diplomacy amid at easing tensions moved to the World Body in New York. The United States described the meeting of the 15-member body as a chance for Russia to explain itself.
Russia cannot block the Security Council from holding a meeting. They will certainly attempt to. They will distract from our unified voices, but they know that they cannot block the meeting, and I expect that knowing what we're dealing with, that they will make an attempt, but the Security Council is unified. Our voices are unified in calling for the Russians to explain themselves. We're going to go in the room prepared to listen to them, but we're not going to be distracted by their propaganda, and we're going to be prepared to respond to any disinformation that they attempt to spread during this meeting.
Russia Foreign Minister, Russian Foreign Minister claims that NATO wants to pull Ukraine into the alliance amid escalating tensions over NATO expansion and fears that Russia is preparing to invade Ukraine. In comments on state television Sunday, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also challenged NATO claim to be purely defensive structure.
It turns out each time that the line they are supposed to defend is moving further east. Now it has already come close to Ukraine. They want to also pull this country into theirs. Though it is clear to everyone that Ukraine is not ready and it won't make any contribution whatsoever to the strengthening of NATO's security.
NATO has shown concern over Europe's energy security after the standoff with Russia. This comes as Russia is considered the continent's biggest energy supplier, with a third of Europe's gas supply. These concerns show how deep this tension between Europe and Russia is in terms of diplomacy, economy, as well as military.
The head of NATO stated on Sunday that Europe needs to diversify its energy supplies. As Britain warned, it was highly likely that Russia, the continent's biggest natural gas supplier, was looking to invade Ukraine. Washington has spent weeks trying to build agreement with European partners on a strong sanctions package. But the issue is divisive, with Germany urging prudence. The European Union depends on Russia for around a third of its gas supplies, and any interruption would intensify an existing energy crisis caused by a shortage.
We are concerned about the energy situation in Europe because it demonstrates the vulnerability of being too dependent on one supplier of natural gas, and that's the reason why NATO allies agree that we need to work and focus on diversification of supplies.
Russia has massed some 120,000 troops near its neighbor and demanded the Western Defense Alliance pull back troops and weapons from Eastern Europe and bar Ukraine, a former Soviet state, from ever joining the Western Defense Alliance. U.S. officials stated that Russia's military buildup had been expanded to include supplies to treat casualties of any conflict. Across the border in Ukraine, locals trained as army reservists as the government scrambled to prepare. The Center for American Press, a U.S. think tank, said Britain would face a challenge uprooting wealthy Russians with Kremlin links from London, given close ties between Russian money and the United Kingdom's ruling Conservative Party, the press, and its real estate and financial industry.
To a different matter now, in Portugal, Socialist Party won Sunday's parliamentary election with an outright majority in the winning party led by the Prime Minister António Costa. Prime Minister has secured more than 41% of the vote, 14 percentage points higher than their nearest rival, the centre-right Social Democratic Party. More with Nabil Khazini.
In a surprise win in Portugal's general election, the ruling Socialist Party has won an unexpected outright majority in Sunday's snap for only the second time in the party's history.
Para mim, seguramente para todos nós.
For me, and surely for all of us, after 6 years as Prime Minister, after the past 2 years in an unprecedented fight against a pandemic, it is with deep emotion that I take on this responsibility that the Portuguese have trusted in me today.
Que assumo esta responsabilidade.
Despite pandemic restrictions, voters headed to the polls. Their aim was stability for the country.
We should have expected more stability, but I don't think this will happen.
A stability that was promised by António Costa, whose party, the Socialists, had won 41.7%, ahead of the centre-right Social Democratic Party on 28%.
Foi uma vitória da humildade.
It was a victory of humility, of confidence, and for stability. First, I want to say thank you to all the Portuguese for the exemplary way the electoral campaign took place, for the civic way that these elections took place in such a difficult moment for all of us.
Joy was also at the other Portuguese populist and nationalist party. Chega took third place in the country's general election on Sunday. Chega party was founded less than 3 years ago and collected around 7% of the vote.
People were not fooled. They sent a direct message to the country's heart and the heart of Portuguese right wing. We want Chega as a solution to the right of any government in Portugal.
Portugal, a country of 10.3 million people, is the poorest in Western Europe. A parliamentary majority would smooth the next government's path in allocating the 45 billion euros of aid as a member of the EU to help spur the country's economy after the pandemic.
China Winter Olympics face a surge in COVID-19 cases as the country has witnessed 119 new cases, including 8 athletes from different countries. Chinese authorities have started a closed-loop policy which puts participants, staff and media away from the public in order to protect them from being contaminated. Osama Yadegan.
China has detected some 119 COVID-19 cases among athletes and personnel linked to the Beijing Winter Olympics during the past 4 days. Chinese authorities imposed a so-called closed-loop bubble in order to keep staff, participants, and media separated from the public. 8 athletes or team officials were among 28 people who had tested positive on arrival at the airport on Sunday. They were mainly Russian and Austrian. International Olympic Committee member Emma Terho also tested positive and declared that she has been in isolation since the weekend.
Even though this is not the start I envisaged, I was happy to see the protocols that Beijing 2022 has put in place are working well.
The closed loop will allow some 3,000 athletes along with coaches, officials, referees, federation delegates and media to move between accommodation and Olympic venues on official transport. But they are not allowed out to move freely in public. Olympic athletes and others must fly directly into the city on charter flights and are tested daily. China is still insistent on its zero-tolerance policy with COVID-19, contrastingly to most countries that are changing their policies, attempting to live with a pandemic that became highly transmissible with the spread of the new strain, Omicron.
Upon Chang's request, the Chinese military sent 2 naval vessels to the country with China's second batch of disaster relief supplies in the aftermath of volcanic eruption, sailing off from South China, Guangzhou on Monday, the eve of the Chinese Lunar New Year. Experts believe the Navy is fully prepared for all scenarios and task demonstrates China's commitment and capacity. In Peru, the nation's environment ministry reported that the oil spill at the coast of Lima on January 15th was twice as large as previously believed. Environment Minister Ruben Ramirez announced that almost 12,000 barrels of oil leaked into Peruvian Sea. More with Nabil Khazini.
Waves of oil cover the coast of Peru. The sea has become dark. Meanwhile, the Peruvian Navy, along with local companies, continue to clean the crude. According to the country's government, the oil spill was twice as big as previously reported, with almost 12,000 barrels of oil leaked into the sea on the 15th of January.
According to the captain, apparently the issue was not much due to the waves. These ships are so heavy with a big draft, so the swell hasn't actually created much of an impact.
From the port, protesters gathered to blame Repsol, the oil company which owns the refinery where the incident occurred. President Pedro Castillo visited the area. He wants an investigation and clear answers.
I'd like to confirm the seriousness and the responsibility of this government to make the company comply with its criminal, civil, and administrative obligations. We cannot have a sick sea.
At least 24 beaches on the country's central coast have been affected. Residents who depend economically mainly on fishing suffer from the consequences.
It's a loss of working days. I'm on 4 days without working. The economy, the pandemic, has affected us. And now comes to the oil spill. I just don't know what to do.
This environmental catastrophe, which has been described by the Peruvian government as the worst ecological disaster, caused the deaths of local fish and several seabirds.
Hong Kong Secretary for Home Affairs Casper Tsui resigned on Monday, weeks after attending a birthday party for Hong Kong delegate to the Chinese National Legislature. Although the party was not illegal at the time, the city's health chief had warned people to avoid gathering in large groups after an outbreak of the virus.
Having a look at the situation from an epidemiological perspective, and the mere fact that yesterday we still discovered new cases in Yat Kwai Lau, and they are not isolated cases. I think the figure is over 20 such cases emerging in Yat Kwai Lau. And that's why, to play safe, protecting the residents as well as preventing the spread of this virus, we have no choice but to extend the RTD, that is the restricted testing declaration, for another 2 days. That is from 5 days to a total of 7 days.
Local police and French troops killed over 60 terrorists in Burkina Faso on the eve of January 24th coup in the poor Sahel country. France's military claimed on Sunday the military victories occurred just days before President Roch Kabore was deposed in a coup. Kabore had been chastised for failing to contain the Islamist insurgency in the country, which has increased since 2015, particularly in the north and the east of the country. A day after residents in Mexican town dominated by a drug cartel claimed soldiers fired on protests and wounded several people, Mexican Defense Department stated that army patrol around the town and a couple of other villages in the western state of Mohican were attacked Saturday for finds with explosive homemade armed cars and gunfire that wounded 10 soldiers. And now moving for more international news in this roundup by Soufiane Kantouri.
In Brazil's southern state of Sao Paulo, at least 9 individuals were injured, and over 500 families were forced to flee their homes. The downpours are predicted to persist until Tuesday. Donald Trump is dangling the prospect of pardons for U.S. Capitol supporters. Former President Donald Trump is threatening to provide pardons to fan supporters who took part in the deadly January 6 takeover of the U.S. Capitol. If he returns to the White House in 2024, 2 German police officers were killed at 4:20 a.m., according to police in Kaiserslautern. The 2 cops, a male and a woman, were on a routine traffic check on a road near Kusel, and the police in the area had launched a huge search for the fugitives. North Korea has released photographs which is said were taken from its most powerful missile launch in 5 years. The unusual pictures taken from space show parts of the Korean peninsula and surrounding areas.
The economic sector Algerian Sonatrach Group revealed that the country has achieved self-sufficiency in gasoline for the first time in its history. Zara Forjani reports.
Under the title Encouraging Production Results, the Algerian Sonatrach Group revealed the preliminary outcomes of its performance during the past year. The group recorded a leap in hydrocarbon production by about 5%, with an increase of more than 10 million tons of oil equivalent between the years 2020 and 2021. Meanwhile, the level of production of refineries stabilized at 27 million tons last year, maintaining the same level recorded in 2020. The production of liquefied natural gas witnessed a remarkable development by 14%, going from 23 million cubic meters to more than 26 million cubic meters by the end of last year. Sonatrach was able to cover the requirements of the national market, which amounted to 64 million tons of oil equivalent, an increase of 9% compared to the year 2020, in contrast to an increase of more than 18% in the levels of the country's exports of hydrocarbons to reach 95 million tons of oil equivalent last year.
The chief executive of Spotify responded on Sunday to growing complaints from musicians and listeners over the role of Joe Rogan, the streaming service's star podcaster, in spreading what has been widely criticized as misinformation about the coronavirus. Last week, Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, 2 musical icons whose cultural influence is so greater than the streaming numbers, removed their music from Spotify to protest the platform's support of Rogan.
I wanted to make this video, first of all, because I think there's a lot of people that have a distorted perception of what I do, maybe based on sound bites or based on headlines of articles that are disparaging. The podcast has been accused of spreading dangerous misinformation, specifically about 2 episodes. I do not know if they're right. I don't know, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a person who sits down and talks to people and has conversations with them. Do I get things wrong? Absolutely, I get things wrong, but I try to correct them. Whenever I get something wrong, I try to correct it because I'm interested in telling the truth. I'm interested in finding out what the truth is. And I'm interested in having interesting conversations with people that have differing opinions. No hard feelings towards Neil Young, and definitely no hard feelings towards Joni Mitchell. I love her too. I love her music. Chucky's in Love is a great song. I don't know what else I can do differently other than maybe try harder to get people with differing opinions on right afterwards. I do think that that's important, and do my best to make sure that I've researched these topics, the controversial ones in particular, and have all the pertinent facts at hand before I discuss them. Again, I'm not trying to promote misinformation. I'm not trying to be controversial. I've never tried to do anything with this podcast other than just talk to people and have interesting conversations.
In a dramatic victory against Daniil Medvedev, Rafael Nadal made history once again as he roared back from 2 sets to capture his record-breaking 21st Grand Slam title at the Australian Open. Nabil Khazini.
Here, moving him 1 clear of Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic in the Slam Stakes.
Nadal was born to be a star and a winner. To the African football now, Mane set a Famara Dadio for Senegal's Open 3-1 win over Equatorial Guinea. Senegal will now take on Burkina Faso in the first semi-final Wednesday, when Mane's team will be aiming to make a second straight final and rid itself for the unwanted label of the best team to never win the Afghan title.
Un match disputé, en face de nous, une équipe vraiment très belle équipe.
It was a tough and strong match from both sides. We faced a team that created problems and difficulties for us in the midfield. But at the end, we managed to get out from this problem. Between the 2 halves, I told my players that we had to score goals and we would enter the match with more strength and power. In the end, we were able to achieve that. Finally, I congratulate everyone for this strong match between the 2 teams. The game played before Trezeguet extra time goal earned Egypt a semi-final spot at the African Cup of Nations as they came from a goal down to beat Morocco 2-1. Mohamed Salah, first goal of the tournament, cancelled out of Soufiane Boufal's early penalty opponent for Morocco, with Liverpool forwards setting up Trezeguet for the goal which saw the Pharaohs advance to the last 4, facing Cameroon over the next stage for the final. Mohamed Salah, after the game, he mentioned that this tournament is so hard, and even Algeria, the champions, went out earlier than expected, and Nigeria, who qualified with 9 points ahead, couldn't keep going further.
I think it's tough for everyone. Like you see, Algeria lost in the group stage, which they won it last time. They had a great team, and they lost. Senegal just qualified with in a group with 1 goal. So I mean, I'm not saying something bad about them. I'm just saying the tournament is tough for everyone. It was tough for us in the beginning until we just adapt. I think Nigeria, after they being the best team in a group stage, they lost. So you never know in any game. So now it's time to focus against Cameroon. So in 6 days, 120 minutes, it's fine. But just you need to fight with your mind, to just carry on. Everything you feel, the pain and everything. I think we are young, we are healthy. Thanks God for that. Just like you need to fight with your mind. I told that to the players after 90 minutes, and they were brave. They were very brave, and they give 100% and we win the game. That's the result.
I'm very happy that my players, they did well, tactically fantastic, perfect on the pitch. I think, general speaking, after we rebound from 1-0, We control the game. We create opportunities. We have free kicks, corners. But it was always difficult against a great team like Morocco's fantastic players.
To this end, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a look again for our main stories. World leaders are applying diplomatic pressure on Russia ahead of a series of meetings over the Ukraine crisis, including a United Nations Security Council session this Monday. After Pyongyang sent a suspected intermediate-range ballistic missile into space on Sunday, the US issued a straightforward call to North Korea to join direct negotiations regarding its nuclear and missile programs with no preconditions. The United Arab Emirates intercepted a ballistic missile fired by Yemen Houthis rebel early Monday as the Zionist President Isaac Herzog was visiting the country. Mali on Monday gave the French ambassador 72 hours to leave the country after hostile and outrageous comments by former colonial power France about its transitional government. During the past 4 days, China has detected some 119 cases of COVID-19 among athletes and personnel linked to the Beijing Winter Olympics, with authorities imposing a closed-loop bubble to keep participants, staff, and media separated from the public. That's all what we have gathered for today's news. The Alt24 news is still rolling, so stay tuned and bye-bye.